Good evening and welcome to the June episode of Northwest City Politics. Today we'll be visiting with Brooklyn Park Mayor Hollies Winston, and we will be discussing many topics of interest to the local residents of Brooklyn Park, but also some of the broader incidents that have happened since the last time the mayor was here. So please join me in welcoming to the show Mayor Winston. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So it's been a minute since you've been back.
Yeah.
And it's safe to say a lot has happened since you were here last. The country has changed. The economy is very harsh. It's, inflation, cost of living, gas prices, a war, metro surge. It must have been, extremely difficult for you as mayor, as it has been hard for us. And so, we're going to cover a lot of topics today, but I think one of the things we should probably begin with is the obvious one, and that is the impacts of metro surge on your city and on you.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that question. I think, regardless of where you land in terms of immigration, the way that the surge was carried out had a extremely adverse impact on, the Twin Cities area, but Brooklyn Park has, specific demographics, 25% immigrants, 60% people of color. And I think because of the tactics that were used, and I think some of them were signed off on by the courts, people just did not feel safe going to work. They didn't feel safe going to their regular grocery stores. So I actually did a tour. I did a tour with Congresswoman Morrison, and then another tour with Congresswoman Craig as well, and we talked to a number of businesses that were really struggling, and Representative Hilsey was with us as well. Talked to a number of businesses that were struggling. I think they were down 50 to 100% in terms of revenue. And then, of course, if people aren't going to work, they're going to struggle with rent and some other basic necessities. So I think just in terms of this country has always stood for opportunity and prosperity, and I think that approach really affected that. And I think some of we know there was racial targeting. I myself was followed like 3 to 4 times, right? And I'm born in Illinois, so so we know that there was racial targeting throughout the city, and I think that really chilled the economy within us. And I think it also, we've worked hard with our law enforcement to build a relationship with residents, and residents came out of it saying they still trust our law enforcement, but I think it did do damage across the metro with relationships with law enforcement. And I think from a general public perspective, those relationships with law enforcement are incredibly important to just maintaining basic public safety. So I think we're on the other side of it. I think we've learned our lessons from it. But it was a trial for us to go through as a city.
Right. And then Brooklyn Park isn't alone in that, right? And so I believe, if I remember correctly, you were part of like the initial group that formed the Safe.
Yeah, so there was
Safe Cities.
There was a coalition that came out of it. I think as things ramped up, the messaging we thought was important. We thought, for things to de-escalate, there need to be multiple viewpoints. And so I think when it came out, Mayor Fry, to his credit, came out with a particular approach. The governor came out with a particular approach. And I think there was a number of suburban mayors who said, we're being affected by this. And so we need to provide a voice that can maybe in some way help to de-escalate this particular situation. So from our perspective, we really focused on the economic impacts that we knew were going to last well after the surge, right? We also wanted to focus on the need for communication with law enforcement so that our law enforcement knows what's going on the ground, if ICE is going to be there, right? We want to have some understanding of what's going to happen. And then I think we also made the case for many of these businesses were hit. People were personally hit. So what's going to be the recovery effort for that? So those were the 3 buckets that we really focused on, all under kind of that understanding of there needs to be a de-escalatory approach from both sides so that those who are most impacted, vulnerable residents, right, can go about their regular lives.
Right, and I think now we're kind of at a point where although the immigration presence in the Twin Cities is much higher than it had been historically, the surge appears to have ended. And we don't see, thankfully, the violence and the aggressive tactics. But it's still an ongoing thing. And as you're saying, the recovery is going to be very lengthy. And I'm sure the viewers at home are wondering, as part of the work that you're doing within the city, to help people that find themselves now in a situation of lost income, lost revenue for their businesses, or even like housing instability or insecurity. Are there any?
So I think there's a number of fronts. So I think as we were going through it, Congresswoman Craig helped with this a little bit. We said, let's come up with some buckets of money, that dollars that can help these businesses that are impacted. So there is some funding that we had set aside for emergencies. So it's not really hitting our budget.
Right.
So we put some money aside to help with businesses that were impacted. And the way we explain it to residents is if your business is struggling and goes out of business, then you've got unemployment, you've got shuttered businesses, it's not a good look. So we set dollars aside for that, I think roughly $300,000 to $500,000. And then we set dollars aside for people that are struggling with rent as well.
Okay.
And then we're working with Hennepin County on that. So Hennepin County, we're using some of our funds, but then Hennepin County has, I believe, some deeper reserves for that. And then I believe, don't quote me, but I think at the state legislature, this session, maybe some dollars were set aside for that as well. And I think there's going to be some ongoing conversations. So I think from the city perspective, we did what we could as quickly as we could. But I think there's these other larger resources that our city is happy to help people tap into if they have questions about that.
It's hard to believe, and the last time that you were here, it had been around the time the legislative session had ended.
That's right.
And then now the legislative session just ended.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different now, not because of the way that the House is divided, not all the things that many people had very strongly advocated for came to fruition. But how did Brooklyn Park fare?
So, one of our first strategic moves when we got in, we realized that we have a strong state delegation, right? We've got 5 people that represent us at the Capitol. I'm not going to go through all of the names,
Sure.
But I think in terms of a organized, unified ask of what we needed the legislature, that was something new, and we needed to build our relationships outside of our city. Right. So we've done a good job in terms of building that out. This year, we were able to get $7.5 million for a community activity center, which, some people say, oh, it's just, well, for us, it's important because there's 2 ice rinks in there, and historically, folks have used those heavily in Brooklyn Park and in surrounding areas. We're a regional player now as far as being a city. Well, initially we were going to take one of those out and put 3 basketball courts, but we realized when we do that, we're telling people that Brooklyn Park is becoming a zero-sum city, which is not the case. We welcome diversity. We want to find a way to accommodate people and what they value. And so that $7.5 million is allowing us, instead of pulling out that ice rink, now we can just build the basketball courts separately. So for us, that's exciting. We also probably got a little over $500,000 for, we have a community either alternative response team or community intervention. I think they're getting dollars, and that's we get ahead of the issues rather than the police showing up. We're beginning to isolate
social work.
Yeah, it's got a social work component. Yeah, there's an embedded social work component, but then that's for the alternative response team, and it helps with some mental health calls. But then we have community intervention where many times we will not isolate, but we'll see youth that are going in a direction, and we can identify them, and then upstream we can address it versus downstream when somebody's putting handcuffs, right? So there's some dollars that are going to that because we've made it very clear that public safety is important to the city. Right,
and the city right now, needs to be able to have time to sort of navigate everything that's happened and come together. Statistically, it'll be interesting. We don't really know how many crimes may have happened that went unreported because of everything that was happening at the time and around other places. And it's great that, Brooklyn Park and its representatives are investing in that. Along those investments also, we're mentioning like the teen center, right? Yeah. So the teen center was, that's been built, but about 60% of that funding, some of it did come from the legislature, was from outside of the city. And so we're excited about that. They call it the Wood. It's really a Zane Wood Teen Center. And we think it'll probably serve around 50,000 youth, which
there's more youth. There's not 50,000 youth in Brooklyn Park.
Right.
I mean, we're a young city. We're not that young.
Okay.
But also, when you think of youth, right, there's youth, they're playing with someone in Crystal or New Hope or this and that.
Correct.
So we needed something regional where we know kids will be safe. They get access to sports, but they're getting access to academics. They're getting access to technology. Best Buy has a hub in there as well.
Right.
So I think it's important for us to invest in this infrastructure, because I think a lot of times when people look at kids going off the rails or when they look at crime, they say there's no context. Well, crime tends to go down when there's economic opportunities and when there's opportunities for youth. So we're doing everything as a city we can to bolster both of those.
Right. Absolutely. And that's really great, because I think when you were here last, which has been a while now, you were still working together to try to provide some kind of a safe space or a place where teens could gather. Yeah. And now here we are. We're reporting back on the progress that's been made, right?
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. And like you said, it attracts youth from the surrounding areas, but it's a great resource to have in Brooklyn Park itself.
Yeah.
And so, we were talking about the economy and inflation, the cost of everything, right? So, we go to the pumps, fill up our cars with gas, but the city has vehicles that it needs to fill up with gas, right?
Yes.
And how are you managing all the pressures of, as a city?
We've got some difficult decisions ahead as a city. And I think one of them is just structurally. I'm not going to go too far down this road, but structurally, we're the 5th or 6th largest. Bloomington is a few thousand bigger than us. They've got $5.5 billion in commercial property values. We've got $2 to $2.5 billion. We've grown some since we've been in office, and we're laying the groundwork for that. But that $3 to $3.5 billion difference, there's tax revenue that comes out of that, right? So Bloomington, in some cases, can say, okay, well, this is rising a little bit. We'll take some of this tax revenue and we'll apply it to that. They've got more options. We do not. And that's why we're really leaning into a biotech district that creates these jobs and closes that gap in terms of commercial property values. But in the meantime, right, I think we have a fire station that we knew we needed to build, and so it's being built. We knew the teen center needed to be there. Community intervention, alternative response teams for public safety. We've invested in drones in real time. So for me, it's from my perspective, and there's a council, right? My perspective is there needs to be some tough decisions made in terms of what are we going to cut, what are we going to pull back on until we begin to see some of this economic growth that we're expecting as a city. And it's not a fun conversation. Had this year we kept our levy maybe to 4.5 or 4.6%. Most cities raised it 7.7 or something like that. I think we're going to have to do something similar for next year, whether it would be as low as 4.5 or lower or a little higher. I think we're going to have to really say where we're going to cut some of the spending, because we've laid a lot of the foundation. Now it's time to watch some of that grow and strategically invest in the areas that are going to provide growth for us.
Absolutely. And the biotech district is an initiative that Brooklyn Park has been working on for a little while.
Yes.
And there have been some delays, of course, with everything that's happening. Businesses not really growing, they're contracting. It's great that, that investment is still there and that you're still working towards that, because I think that'll be a great addition to the city.
Well, I think so. Yeah, we knew that. I think the first year I got in is when we kind of said, hey, we can no longer continue to zone for how we used to zone. Because we were saying we've got 700 acres of land up there. We can't have 700 acres of fast food joints, car washes, and warehouses and mom and pops. I love mom and pops, but we can't just have mom and pop stores. So we said we have to have a bigger vision to cover this gap. So we're moving in the right direction. We got the biotech designation, not this year, but last year from the state. So if you think of Mayo Clinic, they have destination medical at the state legislature. We're the biotech district, right? So that's what we are. So that means future state support. And there's some other financial tools they gave for that. So for us, when people are asking for retail and for restaurants, right, we see 5,000 to 10,000 jobs coming out of that corridor. We see 3,000 to 5,000 housing units. We want mostly workforce. We want market rate. We want some single family homes. So the things that people are asking for, that is where a lot of the growth is going to come from, because you don't, you know this, Eric.
Yes.
15 to 20 minutes from Minneapolis, you're not supposed to have 700 acres of undeveloped land.
Right.
But we do. So that's where a lot of what people have been asking for, that's where that's going to come, but it's also going to help really slow the growth of property taxes long term.
No, that's a great vision, honestly. It really is. And it's wonderful that, you're still working towards that and the council is working towards that. And if anything, there's going to be an election coming up. And it'll be interesting to see what happens at the midterms. But I do believe you'll have like 3 city council members that'll be up for election. And then you yourself will be up for election.
Yes.
And it must be a really tough choice to get up every day and say, wow, it's hard enough taking care of my family and myself. But you sign up to go and take care of your neighbors and your city. Mm-hmm. Are you gonna do it again?
No, I'm going to run again. I'm running again. I'll say that. But because there's unfinished business. I think the economic vision. Here's the thing: is I think again when we come to crime or we come to educational outcomes, I think there's too large a portion of American society that says those folks, those are the outcomes that they're always going to get or that they're supposed to get. And that goes beyond race, right? Yeah. It goes to socioeconomic class. But I tend to say educational outcomes and crime are actually contextually related. So they're embedded within the economic opportunities that exist. Yeah. And so there's unfinished work to do in terms of the biotech district. There's also unfinished work in terms of saying, yes, we're at a 36-year low in crime. Mm-hmm. I want to ensure that we continue to push that down. And the other piece is we are finding as we push down other crime that we're learning more about domestic violence. And we know that if we can get ahead of domestic violence, we can push down crime maybe another 10 points, right? There's a lot that happens in households. And so we're trying to tackle the economics of the thing, right? But also at the same time, the public safety. I think if you do both in tandem, you can get kind of a outsized effect, right? They kind of feed off each other. So that's unfinished, but I think we're doing something different. Right. And it looks like it's working, but we just have to see it through.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you mentioned domestic violence. And I think it's really important to acknowledge, right, that there are resources available. If people find themselves in those situations, they should reach out. I think the city offers resources as well. We
do. So we actually have, forgive me, I cannot remember the name of the group, but there's actually a domestic violence group that is embedded in our police station at times. So we do have a close working relationship to address that. But I think for us, we know that with this community intervention with youth, we're figuring out the factors to get ahead of it, right? We're saying, okay, if we see this behavior, if we do this soon enough and we have this conversation, this is the outcome. We need to get there with domestic violence. Right. And I don't think a lot of people have a great idea on how to do that, but I think it's something that we definitely have to tackle because it's difficult to ask a child or anyone in the family to be
or a vulnerable person
within the family, right? Yeah. To be successful, right? When they're going home and they're experiencing that level of stress, that has outsized impact. Yeah. Long after they've maybe left their parents' household, right? Or for the man or the woman that is going through domestic violence, right? What does that do in terms of how they can contribute to the community, the stability of the family unit, crime in general? So for us, it's beginning to understand those factors, which I think are often overlooked because we say, well, we just want to get the bad guy. Okay, but what if the bad guy is destabilizing the family, right? Or there's something going on. How do we support that? How do we work with that? So that's something that I don't expect a quick fix on it because it's something as old as humans. Yeah. But I think that it is something that we need to begin to address.
Absolutely, and I'm really happy to hear that that's a priority of, continuing to build the city, continuing down the path of the investments in the bio district, but then also, taking care of the people who are maybe suffering silently or maybe through no fault of their own, they find themselves in a situation where they're not safe or they don't feel comfortable even coming forward. And so it's great to know that, you and the city are trying to find ways to make that easier and to reassure people that they should come forward and they'll get the support that they need. But the work really gets done with your city council, and there are 3 seats coming up for election, right?
Yep, there are. I'll say this, I don't like to go into it too much, but I will say that the city councilors that are running, in the East and Central District, I have been extremely happy with what they have brought to this. So it's Nicole Klanowski Central District and Christian Erickson East District. I'm extremely happy of the work that they've done. A ton of the ideas in terms of whether it is development or whether it is how we address crime or how we get resources or just going to the Capitol. And Councilmember Klanowski has done an excellent job in terms of we have a disproportionate amount of congregate care facilities in Brooklyn Park. And so some people's instinct is to demonize the folks that live in those or the owners. And I think one thing that Councilmember Klanowski has done an excellent job on is, folks who live in congregate care facilities are residents. They're residents, just like everybody else is a resident. So they deserve that respect. And those who are investing in those businesses who are doing a good job, right? They deserve that respect. So I just think she has done an excellent job in terms of humanizing what's a difficult issue for our city. And it's hard to find people that understand the economics of it, the business model of it, but then they can also humanize it and understand from that social services side the issues that are really being addressed. And she's done a wonderful job with that. And Christian's just done an excellent job in terms of understanding economic vision, but also understanding how that cascades down and affects people in a real way.
Right, and it's really important to have good relationships, right, with your city council, have an open mind and perspective. And there's one other seat, and so maybe someone is at home watching and they're like, hey, I might want to be part of the city and part of the works of the city. There are many ways that people can participate, right? Not just necessarily running for city council. There's a lot of commissions.
There's many commissions. I know in the West District there's someone who's been, Bernice Cooper has reached out to me, and she seems like she'd be effective in that role. But I know there's some other folks that are considering as well. And then I think there are a number of commissions, right? So I came through the Budget Advisor Commission, which a lot of people say is boring, but I learned about the budget of the city, how the dollars flow, where the dollars come from. But other people are on the planning. So if a new business is coming and they're buying a building, right, or there's some zoning requirements, that comes before the planning committee. So I think there's ways and then we got a Parks and Rec, right? And they get involved in youth and parks and so many other things. So there's so many ways for people to just get involved and learn about the city. We're looking for volunteers all the time. And then of course, like we were saying earlier, there's the city council, which is, it is an investment in time, but you do get to see the city grow, and you get to be a part of that as well.
And people can find out more information about the commissions and any openings, and then that's something that the mayor gets to appoint, right?
For the commissions, yes.
Yeah.
So we do a council vote, and then I tally up the votes or whatever. And I would tell people it's a great way to get involved. I've had a number of just friends who are starting to get involved, and I don't think they even knew about the biotech corridor, but sometimes we'll bring people together for working sessions with the commission. And so we will lay out a particular issue that we're dealing with, or something that we're just moving on that's important, an initiative. And they'll get all these insider details, and then they begin to understand, okay, that's what's happening. So from our perspective, we get to hear their thoughts. Doesn't mean we always agree, but we do get, it helps for us to get other opinions, but also it helps us that other people get to understand what we're doing as a council, because sometimes you make all these decisions, there's not a whole bunch of people that are coming to all of the city council meetings, so it's good to have people that are getting the information out there.
Absolutely. And it is a commitment to serve on a commission or the city council, but thankfully the residents at home can always watch all of these by tuning into CCX.
That's right.
And all of the meetings are live streamed, and they're also available for, if you really missed that meeting, you can replay it on demand, the agendas, the mini minutes. So, I mean, this is a part of, being connected to what's happening in your city. And, obviously we always encourage people to use that. It's also part of available to them from the city website and also by tuning in if they have Xfinity Cable on Channel 16. So,
yeah.
Well, I told you that our time would go by like really fast, and here we are in the last few minutes.
Oh yeah,
of our
I didn't
time.
even notice. It did go by pretty quickly.
Yeah. I always like to reserve the last few minutes for anything that you want, people to know about, any events that are coming up, anything you want to share with the residents of your city, talk more about.
So I know we have Tater Days coming up. That'll be May 30th. We got the parade. I don't want to say the field marshal, but the head person is going to be the grand marshal.
The grand marshal of the parade.
Councilmember Terry Parks, who is, I think we've given him the name Mr. Brooklyn Parks. He's been on the council. He's been on the commissions. He's still on commissions. He's always involved. So he's earned that name.
Excellent.
So that'll be great coming up. The other piece I would just say to Brooklyn Park is, Brooklyn Park is, my family is originally from Chicago area. It's, Chicago has kind of a blue collar spirit to it, working class spirit, and I think Brooklyn Park has a lot of that. And we've been through a lot this past year. Senator Hoffman and Vet Hoffman experienced what they did. The loss of the Hortman family was something that really was difficult for everybody to deal with. And then we had the Metro surge. So we've been through quite a bit. It all kind of, to me, it kicked off. We had a plane crash.
Right.
And then we just had a plane crash maybe a few weeks ago.
Yes,
so
we did.
I'm hoping that's closing the circle. But I will say Brooklyn Park came through it strong. Neighbors help neighbors. We continue to move forward in terms of our vision for Brooklyn Park. People still believe in our law enforcement. So I feel like we've weathered quite a storm, but a lot of that is to the resilience and the character of people in Brooklyn Park, their understanding, their support of one another, support of the council. So I just want to thank you to the city for being strong enough to see it through and not to go at each other's necks, because we saw that in other cities.
Yes.
And I think generally we tried to support one another, and I appreciate that from the city.
Thank you for being here, really, and thank you for all of your commitment and dedication to the residents of Brooklyn Park. We all benefit, even if we don't live in Brooklyn Park ourselves. It's really tremendous, and we're very excited to have you come back, of course, and give us an update. It's hard to believe the election is right around the corner.
I know.
And we wish you all the best of luck in that. Really, honestly, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate you taking the time.
To the viewers at home, as always, thank you for joining us. We have this little volunteer show that has been on the air for more than 2 decades, and we'll continue to bring you information about your local representatives and your local cities as best we can. And until next time, thank you. Be well. Good night.